folks, Scott here. You asked for it, and here it is, a how-to video on creating this interactive carousel card featuring the Ornate Carousel stamps and dies from Hero Arts. This is the Hero Arts stamp set, Ornate Carousel. It features a unicorn, a seahorse, and a regular horse. Now the unicorn pole is sculpted, the seahorse pole is sculpted, the horse pole is straight. So that's why I chose the horse to do this card. I need to extend the pole on the top and the bottom and get rid of that little knob there. So that's why we're going with the horse for this. I reached for my Bristol Smooth cardstock. These stamps are incredibly intricate, and I will use my Zig Clean Color markers to color these. That's why I reached for the Bristol Smooth cardstock. We'll stamp our horse right in the middle of this piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock. I will reach for my VersaFine Onyx Black ink for this. We do have to tape out that knob at the bottom of his pole. We don't want to stamp that, so a little post-it flag at the bottom works just fine. Some Onyx Black ink. I don't think I even have to stamp this a second time. A really good impression. Hero Arts has always the finest stamps. Now we're going to extend this pole. So I just grab my little metal ruler and one of my Pigma Micron pens, and that pole is nice and straight from top to bottom, so all I have to do is add lines to that. Makes it longer. This is my Pigma Micron 02 pen. That nib width seems to match the line width on these stamps very well. Of course, you'll never get rid of that double point where both lines intersect, but once you color that pole, I think it's not very noticeable. I am going to die cut this out. I did make a die cut template. Just use the die to cut a scrap piece of cardstock, and that shows me exactly where the die will cut. I can lay that on top of my stamped image, tape it down to the stamped paper, and then my die will just pop right into that template. I can tape that down and know that I'm going to get a really good die cut on this piece. I really like using die templates, especially on intricate die cuts like this. Now we don't want to cut the ends of the poles, so I'm going to turn this around sideways and do some partial die cutting on the front and the back of the horse. We're going to skip the pole completely and do some partial die cutting. So the top plate, I just put that at the top of the horse, line that up with the pole. It won't cut the pole, it will cut the front half of the horse. Just wanting to check and make sure everything's lined up. Roll it on through my Cuttlebug. Bang, that should have cut the front half of the horse. We're going to spin it around. We're going to do another partial die cut on the back half of the horse. So we want to cut his butt end, but not cut the pole. So line up our top plate again over the back half of the horse, run it through our die cutting machine. We can take up our die, remove our template, and here we've got a really nice die cut on both the front half and the back half of the horse. Now, of course, we need to cut the pole to match the die cuts on the front and back of the horse. So I just grab my metal ruler again, grab my craft knife, be sure to leave a little bit of a white border on the edges of that pole to match the border that the die cut makes. I have to admit, I really like cutting on this Tim Holtz glass media mat. The blade of your craft knife slides along very easily, and you can feel when you've actually cut through your cardstock and are sliding along on the glass. Now we just want to join our cut lines for the pole with the die cut lines on the front and back. They're very close. Very little has to be cut away here, and soon we'll have our main piece for this card that looks like the whole thing has been cut with one die. That's what we're going for, a horse with a longer pole. Now the pole is what's taking all of the weight of this card. It is the piece that is moving. So I figured we should add a little bit of a reinforcement to that pole. So I took that Bristol Smooth cardstock, again it's 100 pound, just cut a little slice off of the end of that. That's going to give us 200 pounds of paper on that pole. We're just going to glue that to the back of our die cut piece, and that's going to give us all the added stability that we need. I'll reach for my multimedia matte glue, just run a thin bead down the strip, and we'll attach that to the back of our horse die cut. Make sure that it's a little bit thinner than your horse pole. That'll give us plenty of stability for that pole. No chance that that pole can bend unless we bend it on purpose. So let's move to the mechanism now. This is just a plain piece of white 100-pound cardstock. I'm going to use one of my circle dies to cut our spinning wheel. And I'm also going to cut a piece of scrap paper along with the cutting wheel to help me find the center of the cutting wheel. So I'll run this through my die cutting machine. We've got our circle, our spinning wheel, and a template. Now this is 2.5 inches. This is a 2.5-inch circle die. I kind of modeled this mechanism after the Lawn Fawn reveal wheel die with two pieces, one that glues down and one that spins. So for the second piece that will actually glue down, I'm going to cut the same cardstock and another piece of paper with a simple 1-inch round punch. That seems to be about the right size to go with this 2.5-inch wheel. Now we have to find the center of these die cuts. Of course, that's what the paper is for. Just fold the die cut paper in half, fold it in half again. Now we could find our center with this, but in order to help us lay out our arrows, I'm going to fold this a third time before I cut off just the tiniest little bit from the center of that, just a tiny little snip. Open it up, and that will show us exactly where the center of this circle is. Just line that up with your die cut cardstock. Take a pencil, poke right through that little hole in the center. There's the center of that circle. We'll do the same thing with our smaller circle. This is the glue down circle. Only fold this twice, cut off a little bitty nip, and that'll show us where the center of this circle is. Just mark that on your cardstock with a pencil. And now we know where the exact center of our die cuts are. So we are going to stamp arrows on this spinning wheel. So just line up your template, fold it in half, mark it, fold it in half the other direction, mark those as well. Fold it on all 4 folds, and you'll get 8 little marks on your circle. If you try and keep your template in the same place, that'll really assist. So we've got 8 little tick marks around our center circle there. I will, of course, reach for my Misty to stamp the little arrows on this. I always forget to stamp things like this before I start putting things together, so I'm really happy that I remembered to stamp this. This is the My Favorite Things Interactive Labels stamp set, really inexpensive. I'm going to use my Onyx Black ink, of course, again to stamp this. This is really easy in a Misty because this is a 2.5-inch circle at 1.25 inches. That's where your tick marks will line up on your little grid paper. So just line up those tick marks at that 1.25 inch mark and stamp all the way around, and you've got a nice evenly spaced row of arrows on your spinning wheel. Of course, we want to erase the pencil marks that showed us where to put our arrows, and I did get a couple of ink smudges on that, so I will reach for my mono sand eraser, Tombow mono sand eraser, and get rid of those smudges. Those are 2 pieces there. Now I want to mark the holes. Where are the holes? Let's poke them through. I'll grab my Tim Holtz craft pick and a self-healing mat and just poke little holes right in the center of both of those. Want to get those as close to the center as you possibly can. We are going to use this brad. This is a mini brad. We're going to use 2 of these on this card. A mini brad is available at Michael's, I believe. Now, I created these washers to not only reinforce our center hole here, but also to give a little space between these 2 circles, because the head of one of our brads is going to ride between these 2 circles. So to make these little washers, I take a little 1/16 inch hole punch, I don't know where this came from. A little 1/16 inch hole punch. Punch some 100-pound cardstock. This is a 1/4 inch hole punch. Just center that smaller hole in the hole punch and pop that out. And we've got a little washer that those brads will actually slide through. Now, I want those washers on those wheels as well. So I'm going to glue the first washer behind the center hole on the back of the arrow spinning wheel. Just center that over the hole there. This is going to add some strength to that hole, and it's also going to add a little spacing between these two wheels so that the head of one of our brads doesn't get caught up. Same thing on the little wheel, a little glue around the center hole, add that second washer around the middle of that hole. Just center your little poked hole right in the middle of that washer, and we'll set those aside to dry. Now that those are dry, we can open up our little poked hole to match the hole of the washer. Now, fortunately, the diameter of the little pokey part of your craft pick is right at 1/16 of an inch. So it opens up that poked hole and matches it to the cut hole of that washer. We're going to put, of course, those washers together. They're going to provide a little bit of space in the middle of this because our horse is actually going to travel around this center brad. So we've got to put one more brad on that front wheel that will carry our horse around that center brad. So we've got to punch one more hole. So on the back of our spinning wheel, I'm going to punch one more hole just a hair's breadth away from that center washer. I'm just far enough away so that when I widen this hole, it's not going to impinge on that washer. So I can push right through that hole and it doesn't get into the washer. It's just off of that washer. So while we're punching holes here, let's go ahead and punch a hole in our carousel horse. Now I've trimmed the pole down so it's 1.5 inches above his saddle. There's 1.5 inches below his belly. So 1.5 inches of the pole on top and bottom. Here we marked a hole about 1/8 of an inch away from the end of the top of the pole, and I'm poking a hole through that with my craft pick. Of course, I should have used my little bitty hole punch, but I didn't think about that until much later in the game, of course. So we managed to get a hole punch through that. Nice hole there. We're going to take one of our brads and put it through the back of the circle. This brad is what's going to ride between the two moving circles, and it's going to carry the horse, carry the pole of our carousel horse on the front. So let's go ahead and add the brad in the center to connect both of these circles together. We want to make sure that our smaller circle has the washer towards the inside so that the two washers are lined up. Can slide those both together and we can go ahead and attach this for good. Now when I spread the tines on a brad and want to leave some room, I usually take my little tin snips and just hold the base of the brad and spread it open over the nips of these tin snips. And that usually allows plenty of room that things move quite easily. Here you can see that everything moves well. The two spin fine, and right there is the head of the brad that's riding between those two circles. So now that's okay, everything's together. Let's see if we can add our horse to this. Now the horse pole has got to travel on top of that center brad, so we're going to add a couple of washers to this brad to raise the horse pole higher than that center brad. So that's two washers, two simple washers on that brad. Then we're going to go ahead and grab our horse with the hole poked in the top of its pole, and we're going to add that to this brad. There we go, right on top there. slide it onto the brad. Since both of those washers are not glued down to anything, we can just spread the tines of this brad with no regard to being too tight. Those open, unglued washers in the middle there should provide plenty of movement for our horse without having to worry about how tight we press down that brad. So let's grab the back, got a hold of the back. Let's spin this and see if it works. Yes, that horse pole travels over the top of that center brad with no problem whatsoever. Nothing is hindering that turn. This is the movement that we are going for, so that the horse stays stationary as it circles the center brad. Exactly what we want. Let's go ahead and take our horse off of here. We're going to have to color our horse. I need to stamp and color both the canopy and the base. But here we'll go ahead and move right to the card itself. We've got our card front, we've got a mat, we've got our card. The front is die cut with a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die. It is 3 3/4 by 5 inches. That mat is 4 inches by 5 1/4. And of course our card base is a regular A2 card, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So let's go ahead and attach our red mat to the card base to begin with. Right away, we'll go ahead and attach that, and we'll go ahead and also make a little thumb notch for the wheel. We'll take our 1-inch punch right in the center, about half of the way down. So I did make a template for this card using the same size cardstock. I drew a line down the center of that, and on that center line, 1 1/4 up from the bottom, we're going to make a little slot. That's the bottom of the pole is going to go in that slot. The top of the pole, its slot is 3 3/4 inches up from the bottom, and that slot is about 3/4 of an inch wide, so that's 3/8 inch on either side of the center line. I made this template so I wouldn't have to cover up the front of my card with a lot of stray pencil marks. So I can put this on my card front, do a quick trace on these 2 slots, and there we've got a nice clean card front with holes showing us exactly where to cut our slots. So I will take my craft knife and cut both of these slots, try to cut on the outside of the line. That's our 2 slots that will hold the top and bottom poles of our horse. So that's everything colored up. Let's take our horse first. We're going to feed it through the top of the card front in that wide slot. Now this is where we get fiddly, and we're going to attach the top pole of the horse to the brad that's on our wheel assembly. This is a little bit fiddly, but if you take your time and are careful with it, you can actually get this pole onto this brad without much worry. The big issue is to not bend the pole on the horse. Just don't bend the pole on the horse. Go ahead and spread the brad open there. Everything's connected with the horse going through the front of our card. Just a quick dry fit there shows us that those arrows are going to disappear behind this card front. So I will go in and actually add a little extra notch on this card front so that you can see the arrows. I think we'll lose the arrows behind this card front if we don't add this notch. So a quick little dry fit again. I want this wheel to be just above the edge of the card so that your finger will feel it just above the edge of the card. If you take that wheel, and we're going to line it up so that the horse is at the bottom of its rotation, so the horse brad is just below the center brad. Move it into position, and then we can tape that wheel and the card front together so they'll hold in place. I actually want to do a couple of dry fits here, and I'm actually going to do a working fit as well. I'm going to see how this works, make sure everything's in the okay place. So I'm adding some just tape runner to the glue part of my wheel, and I'm going to stick that wheel down. Now I'm just using a little tape runner so I can pick it off later, and we'll add some real adhesive to it when we're actually assembling this card. But just to hold it down, I give it a little press on that inner wheel with my bone folder, and then I'm going to slide the bottom of the horse pole into its bottom slot, take the tape off of the wheel, Let's tape down our card front approximately right where it should be and see how this works. Okay, looks like things are working the way we want them to work. That's where we want everything to be. So I'll wipe off the extra tape runner that's on our center glue down circle here. I don't need that. We're going to use some real liquid glue. We're going to reposition that exactly where we want it, put a piece of tape on that, and then we can start adding our final adhesive, whatever is going to actually hold this down to our card. So on the back, we're going to add in foam tape. We're going to use foam tape all the way around this, give us plenty of room for the brads and the operation of the spinning wheel, and also leave room for our bottom of our pole to move up and down. I like to give as much support as possible, so get as close to that wheel as you can, especially on the top there. Now when I use my foam tape on a big surface like this, I often like to leave little handles or legs on the outside pieces of foam. You just fold back your liner paper and give it a crease there. It'll hold it open. This will keep it from sticking right down on your card instantly and give you something to hang on to line it up. So I'll use my liquid adhesive, my multimedia mat, to glue this glue down circle to the card front. This will be the final adhesive that attaches the spinning wheel to our card front. We'll flip this around and line this up with our red mat on our card base. Once it's in the proper position, we can press that down. I'm going to take my bone folder in there and give a little press on that smaller glue down circle, hold that in place, and then we can pull off the rest of those liner papers, attaching this whole front down to our card. Now let's set that aside to dry, and I reach for the inside of the card when I realize that I didn't stamp the outside of the card. Of course, I forgot that. I remembered the arrows, but I forgot the sentiment. So I grab my Mini Misty, I take the pad out, I think, am I going to be able to do this? Here I am crossing my fingers. I, of course, fail miserably. It doesn't stamp well. I've actually got it just the tiniest bit crooked there too. So of course I grab another piece of yellow cardstock and stamp it off on a different piece, cut that down with a stitched rectangle die. I do color the magical with a dark red colored pencil. That's going to be our sentiment. I can ignore the mistake that I made on my card front. Now that has given us plenty of time to let this dry. Let's see how it works. Yes, it's doing exactly what we want it to do. Nice and smooth operation. It's not catching on anything. We can go ahead and add the base and the canopy to our card front. Now those obviously are what's covering up the slots where the pole goes into, both on the top and the bottom. So just some foam tape on the back of those. I think the top of the canopy is poking up a little high, so I take that big foam tape off and I put a piece of really thin foam tape at the top. I think that's right where the brads are on the spinning wheels, so that's about the thickest part of the card right there. That makes the point not quite so outrageously high. So let's go ahead and glue these pieces on. We are getting so close to completing this. It's easy to line these up with the center. If your horse is in the center, then there are definite center points to both of these cut pieces. I just move my horse down to its lowest position and then position this base right under his left hoof. So he just kisses the floor as he comes down. That hoof just kisses the floor as he comes down, and his head just barely kisses the canopy on his way up. Push those down tight. Those are all good. We can get our bastardized sentiment and put some foam tape on the back of that and put that on the front of our card as well. This fits very well. Nobody will ever know that there's a big mistake right behind that. There we go. I think we've got it now. Is everything together? That is our Carousel card. I think it looks really great. I was nothing more than thrilled when I figured out this mechanism. Let's go ahead and put the inside of this card in. Now this is a happy birthday from that stamp set, just stamped on some white and then matted on yellow and red. That's our writing surface on the inside of our card. This is the outside of our card. Oh, it works just beautifully, nice and strong. I love the motion of that carousel horse going up and down, back and forth. But will it fit in an envelope? Okay, let's give it a test. Our spinning wheel is just a little bit beyond the edge of the card, so let's make sure it fits in an envelope. Yes, it looks like it does fit in an envelope. Slides out easily. And I think this is just a little bit of a magical card. I enjoyed this so much. You are magical, and your carousel horse is going up and down. Happy birthday on the inside. I love the fact that the motion on this horse is exactly like the motion on a real carousel. A horse goes up and down and back and forth. And it thrills me to no end that we were able to achieve this and figure out a mechanism to make it work. I hope everybody enjoys this. I hope I didn't go too fast for you. You can always go back and rewind. I recorded this about 3 times before putting it all together here. This is not a simple card. Certainly not for the faint-hearted, but it is a delightful card, and I love how this interactive card really brings that Ornate Carousel stamp set and die set to life. Thanks so much for sharing your time with me here, folks. I really enjoyed bringing you this card today. Please like me, list me, pin me, post me, share me with all your friends. Tell everybody that this how-to is up online, and by all means, happy crafting.